Good afternoon. Today we have with us Ms. Ansu Cherian, lead programs at BORDA South Asia. BORDA, or the Bremen Overseas Research and Development Association, is an international NGO based in Bangalore dedicated to supporting sustainable solutions in water, sanitation, and waste management, especially in smaller and fast growing towns of various countries in South Asia, including India. Thank you, Ansu, for joining us today for an exclusive interaction under our Good Governance series. We welcome you to this interaction and thank you for giving us your time today. To tell our viewers, to give our viewers a context of today's interaction, BODA has recently conducted a study titled Following the Flows, which looks at how water and sanitation system actually function in emerging urban centers across South Asia, since small and medium towns that are growing quickly often receive less attention in conventional policy and planning. And the study traces the journey of water from its source to distribution to use, wastewater collection, treatment, and possible reuse. So it's a very important and critical topic when, if we look at it, because emerging towns and cities are where most of the development is happening right now, and water security is right now the core topic, and we need to pay central attention to it. So today, Ansu will help us understand the insights from this work, this study, and what it means for the future of the growing towns across South Asia. Ansu, before we dive deeper into the questions and about the study, I would first like you to give our listeners an overview of the study. What is it about? Briefly, if you can tell us what following the flows majorly focuses upon.
Thank you so much for having me as part of APAC's Good Governance series, and I'm really glad to be here and also to have this opportunity to share insights from our research following the flows with all of you. Just to give you an overview of the research, it's an initiative by BORDA South Asia and our partners, where we explore how water and sanitation systems actually function in small and emerging urban centers across South Asia. So for this study, we have worked across 20 partner towns in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, where we trace the journey of water through the entire urban cycle from, let's say, from where it's sourced, how it's supplied, used, how used water is generated, contained, and what eventually happens to it through treatment, discharge, or reuse. So these towns, they span very different geographies where BORDA and have partners have been working for many years. Himachal Pradesh, Ladakh, Nepal, Karnataka, Bangladesh, Kerala. So this diversity allowed us to kind of understand how urban water systems operate across very different ecological and institutional contexts. So to undertake the research, we combine GIS, spatial mapping, municipal data, field observations, in-depth conversations with local governments, practitioners, water sanitation experts. And what this allowed us to do was to move beyond simply listing infrastructure and instead looking at how water actually moves through towns in practice. So what emerged was a very nuanced picture. Let's say in many places, water systems operate as a patchwork of formal infrastructure, informal practices, everyday adaptations. But when you really begin to trace these flows together, you see more clearly where systems break down, whether it could be leakage, supply networks, it could be untreated wastewater entering your rivers and lakes, or it could be even just increasing pressure on groundwater. So our job or our role, our hope was to document these realities across these different geographies and provide a very grounded evidence base, helping make visible what's actually happening in emerging urban centers. And this also we hope it will serve as an encouragement for a need for planning in these emerging urban centers, as you rightly pointed out, Ananya, in the beginning, right? And not just plan for it, but also towards a very context-specific climate resilient water sanitation solution that truly respond to the realities of these towns, rather than applying a one-size-fits-all model.
Right. Yes, I think that is very important. Right now, the policies that we have in implementation are kind of one size fits all approach based. So, very important point that you people have kept in mind while doing the study. So, I want to know from you next is what prompted Boda to take up the study, and especially we know that small towns and cities are should be the focus area, but we do not see it in implementation that a lot of organizations or even people are focusing on it right now. So, what is BORDA's viewpoint when it comes to small towns and cities, and what prompted the organization to take this study up?
Yeah. So the motivation really just came from a recognition that the future of urbanization in South Asia and India is increasingly unfolding in our emerging urban centers, aka small and medium towns. A significant share of population growth is happening in settlements that are transitioning from rural to urban. But if you look at the planning conversations, may it be research or infrastructure investments, much of the attention has historically been directed towards large metropolitan cities. But that said, I'm actually glad to see we're slowly seeing a very intentional shift in policy conversations and central government schemes towards smaller towns, which is definitely a welcome development. But even so, small towns often remain somewhat invisible in many of these discussions because they're too large to be treated as a rural settlement and often too small to attract the scale of attention and investment that big cities receive. But yet, these towns play a very important role. So, if you notice, they act as economic and social bridges between rural areas and larger urban centers, and their water and sanitation systems directly influence surrounding landscapes, agriculture, your groundwater systems, your local ecosystem, right? So another important reason we focused on these towns is that many of them are still in the process of building their core infrastructure systems, which means that planning and investment decisions are being made today, which will shape their long-term development trajectories. So if we get it right at this stage, there is a real opportunity to develop more resilient, circular, and context-appropriate water systems, rather than simply replicating the fragmental models that many large cities are now struggling to fix. So for us as an organization, this focus also reflects the direction our work has taken over the last many years. I mean, we, along with our Indian partner organization, Foundation for Inclusive and Sustainable Habitats, FISH, we have kind of in the last 4 5 years been carving out a niche, working in these small and medium towns. We have been engaging very closely with the local governments and state partners in these contexts. So, in many ways, I think this research is like an opportunity for us to step back from our on ground engagements that we've been having over these many years and just systematically document some of these patterns, challenges, and opportunities that we're seeing across the system.
Okay, so I'm sure you talked about the invisibility of these small and medium towns when it comes to mainstream policy and planning for urban infrastructure and sanitation and water management. So that brings me to my next question. Why do you think that these small towns and cities have remained out of the larger planning discussions? What are the major reasons behind it?
Okay. This is one. This is exactly like I think many of us working in the small town space are constantly grappling with, or at least trying to move towards solutions for. I mean, in many ways, we try to we understand the nature of the problem, but then the question is how do we address it in a meaningful way. But for now, I'll answer your question. The structural reasons to why they remain outside mainstream planning and investment conversations. One of it is visibility. For instance, your large metropolitan projects, they tend to attract a lot more attention because of their scale, political prominence. While smaller towns, despite their growing importance, could remain lesser visible in these discussions. But beyond that, there are also institutional and financial realities that shape what is possible in these contexts. For instance, many urban local bodies in small towns, they operate with very minimal or limited technical capacity and a constrained revenue base. Their creditworthiness is often quite low, which makes it difficult for them to attract even larger investments or grants or financing for infrastructure projects. Another important challenge lies in how responsibilities for water and sanitation are structured. This is not probably true for all states, but in some states, urban local bodies do not have full autonomy over the entire service chain, right? So, therefore, different parts of the same system are often implemented by different state level agencies. Like, for instance, water supply infrastructure might be handled by one department, your sewer networks by another, your treatment plants by a different agency, and sometimes your intercept and divert projects within your lake rejuvenation by yet another body, right? So while all these investments may be happening, they're not always planned or implemented as one system. And I'm only talking about the water and sanitation sector. So this is generally not the case, let's say, in a city like Bangalore, where uh, water sanitation is mostly taken up by BWSSB or Bangalore Water Supply Sewerage Board. Uh, so that is one another major issue. And then the third issue that I could maybe point out is planning models also tend to be quite standardized. Like, for instance, approaches designed for larger cities are often attempted in a smaller town, even though their settlement patterns, their institutional arrangements, environmental contexts are very different. So I think because of all of these factors, these small towns often tend to fall into a bit of a planning gray area, which is also why this research also helps us understand how systems are different vis-a-vis a larger city, and how they really function in these smaller towns.
Okay. You mentioned in the context when you said the when you gave an overview of the study, you mentioned that this study is not just an infrastructure study or an infrastructure audit kind of it. So, what makes it different? How does it move beyond typical infrastructure and compliance audit kind of a thing?
Yeah. So traditionally, we often measure things like, let's say, how many households are connected to your piped water connection, how many toilets have been constructed, how many treatment plants exist. Well, they are important indicators, but they don't always tell us how well the system is actually functioning in practice. So what we try to do here is to look at urban water systems not just as an infrastructure, but as a system of interconnected flows. Like, for instance, in fact, one way we often explain the studies. So if you look at the whole report, it's very visualized, and that's it's
Yeah.
very intentional because we wanted to kind of show a lot of our research, in a more graphical manner, so it's very easily perceivable, right? They show how I mean, they show how a loop should ideally look like from, like, for instance, how when water moves from source to supply, use, collection, treatment, it shows a loop. But then here we have identified red sections in red, which highlights where systems are breaking. Your gray dotted lines represent your informal flows. And these informal flows could be definitely challenges as well, but they could also emerge in response, right? Like, they could be workarounds for by households, communities, or even municipalities. So what I'm trying to say is you might see a town having a functional STP, which is the definitive answer on a checklist if you do an audit. But in reality, this STP that I'm talking about, its approach road is flooded because through the year, because of which the operation and maintenance of this STP hasn't been done in a while. Which means no one knows the actual quality of the treated used water coming out of this STP. So now, why is the road flooded is a whole different story. Maybe I'll try and touch upon it later in the interview. But the point is, when you start tracing these flows from source to supply, use, wastewater generation, containment, treatment, disposal, reuse, the whole cycle itself, you begin to see the system much clearly. And what becomes visible is that there are a lot of points where the system breaks, or there are also a lot of points where your towns and communities adapt and cope. And you get in all these interesting examples of resilience, informal practices, community level measures, municipal improvisations, uh, also things where, where the formal infrastructure and the informal practices coexist. So, which is why we felt, this should not be just an audit where it's a checklist. Okay, I have this infrastructure, but rather let us document these flows, these gaps, these coping mechanisms. So we really shift from an infrastructure inventory of sorts to a system level understanding of how water sanitation actually function in an emerging urban center.
Right. So it is not just that these kind of things are there and this infrastructure is being implemented, but it is going beyond to understand how it is functioning, how what is its impact, and how it can be improved. Sort of that thing. Okay.
That's
Understood. Very interesting. Actually, it is something that I don't think I have come across till now when we talk about water management and water sector in India. So you also mentioned that you have worked in different regions of South Asia, right? For this study, I have also gone through the study a little bit. There are cases from India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. So these regions are different from each other with different needs, contextually very different. So what did this regional diversity reveal about their structural change challenges and shared challenges? What were the shared challenges that you could see?
yeah, yeah. I mean, when we started off with this research, we also thought we're going to come up with so many different answers or challenges that are going to come up. While there were some, uh, we could feel so many same patterns emerging, right? I mean, we looked at hills, coastal belts, peri-urban, your agri areas, your delta regions, but uh, there were very similar patterns that kept coming up. So across many of these towns, what we observed were fragmented systems, weak coordination between institutions, and an absence of a complete service chain. So, like I mentioned before, different parts of the water sanitation cycle are often handled by different agencies. Like, for instance, water supply by one department, sewerage by networks by another, right? And while the sad, unfortunate part is the urban local body itself has limited decision-making power to bring these pieces together. So, while infrastructure does get built, the connections that make the system function as a whole are often incomplete. So you might see sewer networks, septic tanks operating side by side, um, but then there might be limited coverage, there might be irregular desludging, right? So these things that actually make the system function tend to be missing. Treatment plants exist, but then the networks that need to bring the used water from different homes to the treatment plant are not in place. The toilets are constructed under various sanitation schemes, but then the downstream systems for treatment generally tend to be missing. So this is on sanitation. Now, on the water supply side, let's say many towns they rely on a mix of intermittent municipal supply, groundwater extraction, private water vendors, and during dry periods, a lot of these households often depend on purchased water, which basically slowly, the only thing it's shifting water from being a public service to becoming a daily household expense, right? So and at the same time, the heavy dependence on groundwater is putting increasing pressure on local aquifers with signs of salinity, contamination, and used water. They without treatment, they tend to flow into your rivers, canals, your wetlands, your backwaters. This is gradually affecting all your surroundings. It's like I said, it's an interconnected system, right? It's impacting the groundwater. It's impacting the water that you're going to draw for your own personal usage, right? Another interesting layer that we observed was in the process of expanding modern infrastructure, some traditional and locally adapted water systems are slowly also disappearing. The systems that historically helped communities manage water in ways that were very closely tied to the local geography and climate. So these are also disappearing. So what became clear is that the challenge is not simply about building more and more infrastructure. It was about how the entire water cycle has to be planned, connected, and managed over time. And I think what kept coming back to us after going through all three countries was that infrastructures are there, they exist, but the service value chain has to be made complete. Otherwise, it remains unusable for a lot of people.
Okay. Uh, from this study as well and from the work that BORDA has been doing overall, if you could recommend three immediate policy shifts to address water and sanitation challenges faced by the small towns and urban centers, what would they be? Pertaining to this study as well, what you have noticed while conducting the study, and overall what BORDA has been doing from its work till now.
Okay, three. Okay, all right. All right. So,
Three major.
first would be three, right? Okay. So, first would be to move from an infrastructure project perspective to a full service chain planning. So, and it's not just it's not just they build a toilet and then they get done with it, but think about how do you contain your used water, how do you convey them? How do you treat them? How do you safely dispose and reuse it? That's a whole different conversation, which I'm not touching upon a lot at this point of time. So, without this systems approach, your investments risk remaining fragmented and ineffective, simply said. Point number two could be to strengthen your municipal capacity and coordination. Your small town governments, they definitely need stronger technical, financial, institutional capacity so that they are more empowered. And that is also what is intended in the 71st Constitution. How do you empower them to make decisions for themselves? So that they could be in the form of different tools, methodologies, capacity building. How do you really ingrain uh, this kind of a capacity within the municipality is definitely a question to ask. So it could be through better data monitoring systems. It could be through stronger coordination. It could also be that where the state parastatals, while they probably are involved in the different infrastructure decisions, how much can the ULB also kind of contribute to it, which will really also reduce a lot of mistakes that could potentially be made on ground, especially because the ULB knows that town like no other. And I think that realization is also important. And embed circular water management and reuse. Treated used water should not be viewed as a waste. And I think the economic survey 2025-2026 is very clearly reiterated that it is a resource. It is a resource with high monetary value as well. So and this is the work that we are doing right now about how safe reuse can support your agriculture, your landscaping, your aquifer recharge, industrial use. So closing the loop through reuse, it not only, of course, it protects your water from pollution, but it also strengthens your long-term water security for all of these emerging urban centers, right?
Right.
So the point is
Yeah.
that they are critical nodes in South Asia's urban future. I think these small and medium towns. I think that is important for us to realize, so that we really, as from a policy perspective, we really push to understand that they are key contributors to a sustainable urban transition across the region.
Okay. I have one follow-up on this about the second thing that you talked about, building capacity, which I also believe is really important. And if that is being done, then probably half, or not half, but a major part of the problem would be solved. So, is BORDA somehow also helping in building capacity of municipal organizations? If you are, could you just highlight how you're doing that?
So what I mean, there are multiple things that are happening parallelly. For instance, Intercept and Divert is the program that is. I mean, you probably know it's part of the scheme, SVM scheme, um, and there is funding allocated for it. But then a lot of these urban local bodies, they don't know how to maybe do an Intercept and Divert. They know that there are water bodies in their town which needs to be rejuvenated, and not from a lake rejuvenation alone perspective, but mainly because there's used water coming into the lake, and it needs to be there needs better planning around it. But they don't know how to develop a DPR for IND, which is the next kind of next step to do. So given that, what we have done is we developed some DPRs for them, but then we have also now developed an IND SOP, which the municipalities can directly refer to. So this is the kind of tool I talked about, right? This is one example. Another is, for instance, we are putting in these borewell automation, sensors where the borewell. So there are a lot of borewells in municipalities. The municipalities they rely on, and they need to be on and off at a particular time. And because there is a delay in on and offing it, because they don't know when the sump fills up, right? Simply because of that, and there's a half an hour wastage of water happening. So now for that, what we did is we put on these sensors, and because of it, these I mean you can really just operate it from your device when you know the sump is full. And but then okay, you can stop there where you have a system in place. But is the municipality really enabled to start using it? Are your watermen really enabled to start using it? Not really. So that is where we have to do a lot of hand holding with them. We create an O&M plan for them. We work with them. So these kind of training programs we kind of build in. So this is another system. Working very closely with also a lot of your ward, like for instance, your councillors, right? And working with them to really ingrain the need of all of this will then also help better decision making at the engineering part of your municipality. So these are different things. I mean, I could go on, but then these are some really recent examples that we've done in terms of municipality capacity formation.
Understood. And these devices that you are talking about, the borewell devices, are they like based on IoT?
IoT, yes.
Do they use IoT? Okay.
Yes,
So these are to prevent wastage of water, right?
yes, yes. It was initiated for
Okay.
that, but it also gives a lot of data now because now you know how much
Right.
groundwater is available. So that those are additional benefits. But this was initiated
Can
for
it
that.
also, I don't know if can it also judge the quality of water somehow? Is that also
Mm.
a feature
That's
that,
not
no, not
that's not
right now?
yeah, it's not added in right now. That could be. I mean, we'll have to add another layer to it. Yeah.
Okay, understood. These were all the questions I had, but I have one more question about the studies topic. I find it very interesting following the flows. Uh, how did you come about this title? Like, who thought of it, and how did it come about?
Yeah. No, we really spent a lot of time thinking about it as a team. We don't want to say assessment of water sanitation
Yes.
in 20 small terms. We don't want to do that because the whole document also has been kind of drawn out is like I said, very graphical, which means we wanted to people to read. So everything is also story based, right? If you see,
Yes.
there are very less report kind of structures. Everything, there are a lot of stories about what's really happening on the ground and all of that. So we needed the title also to reflect that. So we wanted to, and if you also see all of our titles, everything is about the flow. Because at the end of the day, we wanted to say it's one single flow. It's not just fresh water supply and it's not just used water. It is one single flow, which is all has to come back to once, and it has to go in circle. So it has to be a circular loop. So flow was a very clear word that was there for us, and then we wanted to follow it. So we wanted to follow the flows. That's, I mean, yeah, it is a lot of brainstorming to be very frank.
No, very interesting, but thank you. Ansu, thank you. It was a really interesting conversation, something really unique that you people are doing, and very important right now to ensure water security, which is something that we need alongside the development that is happening. So, thank you for giving us your time today, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope you did too. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. Thank you for being here with
thank
us today.
you. All right, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.